Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, let me introduce myself. My name is Rahelia Parwati, student ID number 234111051. I'll be presenting today's learning material. Let's start with the first slide. In this slide, I will explain the relationship between psychology and the decision-making process. Essentially, decision-making is the process of selecting the best alternative from several available options. In the world of business and accounting, decisions are often considered rational and data-driven. However, in reality, individual decisions are not always entirely rational. This occurs because the decision-making process is influenced by psychological factors. Psychology relates to how a person thinks, feels, and behaves in certain situations. Factors such as emotions, perceptions, past experiences, and personal motivations can influence how a person assesses information and makes choices. In the context of behavioral accounting, understanding these psychological factors is crucial because many decisions made by managers, accountants, and management rely more than just on financial figures and reports. The way individuals interpret financial information is also influenced by their mental and emotional state. For example, a manager who has had a negative experience with an investment may become more cautious or even overly pessimistic when faced with a new investment opportunity. Conversely, someone who has previously achieved significant returns from a decision may become overconfident in making subsequent decisions. Therefore, understanding the influence of psychology on decision-making is crucial. By understanding psychological factors, individuals and organizations can be more aware of the potential biases that arise, so that the decisions taken can be more objective and of higher quality. This slide will explain several types of psychological biases that often arise in the decision-making process. Bias is a tendency in thinking that can influence how a person assesses information, resulting in decisions that are not entirely objective. The first bias is overconfidence bias, which occurs when a person has an overly high level of confidence in their own abilities or judgment. In this situation, individuals tend to believe that their predictions or decisions are always correct, thus underestimating the possibility of errors or potential risks. The second bias is anchoring bias, which is the tendency for individuals to rely too heavily on initial information received. The first piece of information obtained often becomes the primary reference in assessing a situation, even though there is much more relevant information available. The next bias is loss aversion, which is the tendency for individuals to fear losses more than they desire gains. In many cases, individuals prefer safe decisions to avoid losses, even though these decisions may reduce the opportunity for greater gains. Furthermore, there is herding behavior, which is the behavior of following the decisions or actions of others without conducting in-depth analysis. In the business and investment world, this phenomenon is quite common when individuals follow the majority decision because they feel safer if they do not differ from the group. The existence of these biases demonstrates that human decision-making is not always entirely rational. Therefore, it is important for individuals and organizations to be aware of these biases to minimize their impact on the decision-making process. Besides bias, several other psychological factors also influence the decision-making process. One of these is emotion. Feelings such as happiness, anger, fear, or anxiety can influence how a person assesses risks and opportunities. For example, someone in a negative emotional state may become more hesitant or pessimistic in making decisions. The next factor is perception, which is how an individual interprets or understands information. Two people receiving the same information may have different assessments because they differ in their perspectives on the situation. Furthermore, there is motivation, which is the internal drive that drives a person to strive for a specific goal. Motivation can influence decisions, for example, when someone prefers decisions that will increase achievement, profit, or personal satisfaction. Another equally important factor is personal values and experiences. Past experiences often form the basis for individuals' assessments of the situation at hand. Positive experiences can increase self-confidence, while negative experiences can make someone more cautious in making decisions. In conclusion, psychology has a significant influence on the decision-making process, particularly in the field of behavioral accounting. Individual decisions are influenced not only by available data and information, but also by internal factors such as emotions, perceptions, experiences, and personal motivations. Various psychological biases, such as overconfidence, anchoring, loss aversion, and hurting behavior, can lead individuals to make less objective decisions. Therefore, understanding psychological factors is crucial for managers, accountants, and decision-makers within organizations. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.